Hi and welcome to another video by Are You Arty Kids. In this small video we're just going to be looking at some extremely basic watercolour techniques for painting flowers just in a sort of an impressionistic style. So the first one we're going to do is we're going to do something based on using sort of the wet on wet technique. So I've got a number 10 brush, got myself some clean water. I've got just a rag, so you can use paper towel, loo roll, cleaning cloths, anything like that. Got my little watercolour set and got my mixing lid. Okay, so I'm just going to use oranges and yellows and reds, warm colours. And all I'm going to do is I'm just going to try and create the impression of basic flowers. So I'm going to put some clean water down first, and I'm going to do it in very much like a hub and spoke sort of approach, a little bit like a firework where you've got a centre point and the things come off in a sort of star radiating round. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to put some water down in a sort of central point radiating round, and then I'm going to go into my orange, get that nice and wet, so I'm plenty of pigment off there, and then I'm just going to radiate that around and just get that bleeding naturally into the water. So that's our first little technique there, really simple, just one colour, wet paint on a wet watered surface, and you get a really lovely natural sense of dark and light just as the sort of paint finds its own level on the page, which is really, really nice. And what you could do on that is you could add obviously light and dark tones, so really work into my yellow, get a nice bit of pigment off that, and while that's still wet I could just put maybe some nice little flicks, little sunbursts of yellow just in there as well. So it's almost like a little two colour wet on wet, and it just finds its own way, and that yellow will obviously mix with that sort of orange tone, and you get these really nice little delicate shadow areas as well. So that's the first one we're going to look at. Zoom in a little bit. Okay, next one we're going to do is we're going to use the rag itself. So I'm going to make sure I've got some liquid on my orange, make sure that's really nice and saturated. And it's not a very big paint set I'm working with today, but I'm just going to sort of manipulate this rag into a small area that I can dab onto that, and then just lightly blot. So not rubbing, just blotting in an up and down motion, and you could do it in a circular motion if you were trying to create almost like a flower head or something like that. And then again, you could add more colours to it. So if you wanted to go light, maybe add another colour, really work a yellow, find another piece of rag, you can put it around your finger head, or you don't want it too tight because you do want some of those little creases in the rag head to get some of this pigment on here, and then just blot that in. So literally just an up and down motion just to blot. So that's almost like a rag blot. So we've got a wet on wet and then a rag blot. Using the rag as well as the tool, so what we could do, could really twist that round, you know, almost making it like tubular, or like almost a bit like a paintbrush really, or a pen head or a pencil head. And again, just going to go back to my orange, make sure I've got a little bit of liquid on that pigment there. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to put my rag into, so I'm going to mould it into a little tip. I'm going to put that in there, and then I'm going to flick, just like we did with the paintbrush before, just radiating out from the centre point like that. So that's very much almost like a dry on dry painting technique really. So I don't want a lot of liquid on there, and I want this sort of on and off approach really that you get with using this dry rag. And you could use a brush for it as well, but the thing with the brush is you end up with it looking quite deliberate, and you know, by using the rag it's a little bit accidental, you're not quite sure how it's going to look, and you can overwork it like anything else, you know, and you just get that light and dark feeling of different flower heads. Okay, so that's more of a rag drag approach, a rag flick, and this one is more of a rag blot, and then we've got our wet on wet. Okay, so some basics from there. Now if we were doing more sort of wet on dry, what I'm going to do now is, if we just think of a sort of basic daisy flower, you know, petals that radiate around, those sort of long elongated bean rugby ball shapes. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use my orange again, really saturate, so I want lots and lots of pigment coming off there, like that, and then you just draw yourself a little centered dot if that helps you. Remember the anatomy of the brush, you've got your tip, you've got your belly underneath, and you've got your head on top. So we're going to use a lot of the tip, a bit of the belly here. I'm going to pick those out, and I'm just going to draw some really nice big petals that radiates around there, and you can obviously you could keep filling them in if you wanted. And then I'm just going to use this orange at the center of the flower while it's still rich, and I'm just going to put a little bit of that orange all the way around, about a centimetre or two, like that, and then I'm going to wash that off. Okay, just use my rag to take some of that excess water off. Then I'm going to go into my yellow, and again work that brush into the block, making sure I've got lots of pigment so it's really bright. And then I'm just going to put some yellow at the tip of the flowers, quite nice and rich, like that, at the tip of the flower petals. And then I'm going to wash that off, squeeze out any water. So I'm now just working predominantly with a damp brush. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to get this yellow and orange moving towards each other. Keep taking that colour off. Moving that yellow. Keep taking the colour off. Pushing that orange up into the yellow, take the colour off, damp the brush, and I'm forcing it into the edges, take the colour off, and I'm blending one colour into another by pushing that orange up, and I'm also just working the edges of that individual petals. So I'm getting a really soft blend or fade or vignette. And this is just super basic, just quick little technique. And obviously you could go back and you could, you know, go even darker in the center if you wanted to give that illusion of that the flower's going in. But this is just absolute basic techniques of just putting the yellow in to the orange. Just going to put some more yellow into these ends here, and it almost, because it's sort of a little bit wet, sort of naturally bleeding into the colour. So just to show a little bit of a difference there. So got wet on wet, natural bleed, we've got a little rag blot, got a little rag drag, we've got more of a wet on dry, just picking them out a little bit stronger. And that's a few little basic sort of techniques if you were just starting off maybe with, you know, just creating impressionistic style watercolour flower heads. Thanks for watching.
Sure.